indictment in open court. And at this time, it is my understanding that Mr. Hoffman is prepared to enter a plea of guilty to all counts.
And Mr. Hoffman, do you understand everything that's been said here today?
Yes.
It's been indicated to me it's your desire at this time to enter a guilty plea to counts 1 and counts 2 of the indictment, charges of aggravated murder and unclassified felony. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
It's also been indicated to me it's your desire to enter a guilty plea to count 3, an additional charge of aggravated murder under a different statute, an unclassified felony. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
It's also been indicated to me it's your desire to enter a guilty plea to count 4, a charge of aggravated burglary, a first-degree felony. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
You desire to enter a guilty plea to count 5, charge of kidnapping, a first-degree felony. Correct?
Yes.
And is it your desire to enter a guilty plea to count 6, a charge of rape, a first-degree felony?
Yes.
Family deserves to know that this was a random burglary that went terribly, terribly wrong. No one person, no family was singled out. It's tragic. Can't undo what is done. We apologize.
Hey y'all, it's Bethy. Welcome back to another True Crime Tuesday video. I'm hoping to get this one up earlier and on time. I'm again filming on a Monday. This weekend was just like a mess. But I'm hoping to get this up super early for you guys. My camera is on kind of low battery, so I'm hoping that it makes it all through this video because this is about a story that happened just a couple of years ago. So on November 10th, 2010, Tina Herman went missing with her family friend Stephanie, let me make sure I get her name right, Stephanie Spran, and her 2 children. Colleagues of Tina Herman reported her missing when they realized that she didn't get to work at Dairy Queen that day on November the 10th, and they said it was very not like her. So they actually went to go check on her in her home, and when they arrived at her home, no one answered the door, and when they looked through the window, it was like a horror scene. They actually mentioned that when you look through the window, you can see that there was blood spattered everywhere. So they immediately called the police, and when the police walked into the house, it was the worst thing they could have imagined. No one was home, there was no bodies in the house. Tina was gone, her 2 children were gone, and her best friend Stephanie was also gone. There was very clear trails to the bathroom as if bodies had gone dragged into the bathroom. In the bathtub, there was nothing but blood everywhere. So I will save you guys the horror and not show any pictures. So the search began for Tina, her good friend, and her 2 children. So soon after they searched the entire house for someone, they were able to get into the garage and they found Walmart bags with receipts. The receipts showed that someone had purchased tarp, duct tape, rope, and really large, like hefty, thick bags, thick garbage bags. So that kind of led police to immediately go to Walmart and see if there was any way for them to find who purchased this and when they purchased it, to kind of get them closer to the killer or the person that kidnapped the family. When they went to Walmart, Walmart stated that they would actually need the product to find out who could have purchased it, and there was not really any way for them to look for it. So when police asked to just see the surveillance camera for that day, Walmart was actually able to provide them with that. And if I'm able to screen cap the surveillance that they were able to get and put it right here, I will. I'll go ahead and put a little video next to me while I'm talking, or in replacement of me while I'm talking. But that was who they saw on the tape. And the person on the surveillance tape, his name is Matthew Hoffman. He was 30 years old at the time, and that is how they were able to go ahead and find out who he was, kind of, or what he looked like, I should say, because they had the person on tape, but they still didn't know who it was. So after further search in all the cameras, They were also able to get footage from the parking lot where they were able to see Michael Hoffman get into a Toyota Yaris. So that led police to further investigate, and they were able to locate all of the Toyota Yaris owners around that area in Ohio. By the way, this was in Mount Vernon, but the bodies were found elsewhere. We'll get more into that in a little bit. So this was Mount Vernon, Ohio. They were able to get record of all of the drivers that owned a Toyota Yaris, and they were going through all of the pictures, and they stopped at one picture of this man, and it looked just like the guy in the Walmart surveillance. So they of course stopped in their tracks, and they were like, this is our guy. They went and were getting ready to pack up all of their stuff to go knock his door down, when another cop actually mentioned that he actually spoke with Matthew. They had found Tina's car at a nearby college, and they shut down the college because she was obviously missing and her car was just there abandoned. So they had the school closed down for emergency just in case he was still in the area. So when there was a cop surveilling the area, he actually ended up running into Matthew and asked him what he was doing there, because he was kind of just loitering around in his own car. And when he asked him what he was doing there, Matthew responded, "I'm waiting for my girlfriend. She works at the school," or something of that nature. And he was like, "Oh really, like what's your girlfriend's name?" And he said, "Sarah." And Sarah comes into play because Sarah is actually Tina's daughter. She was also in the house when all of this was going on. And that didn't trigger him because he just didn't think anything of it at the time. And it was when they pulled up the picture, he was like, "Hey, I talked to that guy." And when he mentioned that his girlfriend's name was Sarah, they were like, "Oh my God, this is totally him." He threw her name out there because he didn't know what else to say. So they went and they got a warrant to check out his house. And when they went there, they broke open his door and they found him sleeping on his couch. But not only did they find that, they found the house was packed with leaves all over the walls. And I'm gonna put a picture here so that you guys can see it. He had bagged up a ton of leaves and he stapled them onto his wall. So his house just looked insane, like he hoarded leaves. It was the strangest thing ever. And police actually mentioned that they were afraid, because there was also leaves on the ground. And they mentioned that they were afraid that they were going to find a body under the leaves, or they were afraid to step because they were afraid that they would step on someone's body. However, that didn't happen. They ended up searching the rest of the house and they got to the basement where they actually found Sarah. Sarah was in a sort of makeshift bed that was filled with, you guessed it, leaves, and she was tied up, and she had been molested multiple times. So for some reason, Matthew ended up sparing her life, and I'm assuming it was just to torture and molest her. When he spoke to police, he told them that he was really nice to her, that they had really fun times together, and that he would make her burgers. And when they interviewed Sarah, she said that it was nothing like that, that she assumes that he said all of those things to kind of like make himself feel better. She said none of that was true. They even mentioned that she was wearing a bag with 2 leg holes cut out of it as if it was a diaper. So he was obviously not really allowing her to come in and out of the room as she pleased. Told you guys, my camera was gonna die. And it did. Die, it did. Okay, where was I? Where was I? So they found Sarah. He got arrested for kidnapping, right? When they questioned him for hours and hours, and it was basically for nothing, because he confessed to absolutely nothing. And finally one day he mentioned that he had a horrible dream. He said that he had a dream that he was at a food plant and that he opened up a garbage bag and found dismembered bodies in the garbage bag. So he said it freaked him out and that everything came back to him, because according to him, he had forgotten about what had happened. He didn't remember, and he ended up confessing to their murders. He showed police where he had put their bodies. So one thing that I haven't mentioned is that Matthew Hoffman was a tree trimmer.
These bodies was as a result of information provided by Matthew Hoffman. The bodies were located in a wooded area, inside of garbage bags, in a hollow tree, off of Yankee Street, which is west of Fredericktown here in Knox County.
And what he did, I mean, if it's not obvious enough, he was obsessed with trees. So what he did was he took his tree trimmer equipment, he dismembered Cody, which was the little boy. He dismembered, I believe he was 11 years old. He dismembered Tina and he dismembered Stephanie. He stabbed them to death and dismembered them. And he took them to this hollow tree and put them, basically started from the top and with a pulley system led them down into the hollow tree. Sorry, Summer's behind the camera. So he stuck them into that hollow tree, and authorities say that if he had not confessed, they would have never found the bodies. They said that they were looking in the completely opposite direction from where their bodies were actually found. And the deal that they had to cut with him was they told him that they would not give him the death penalty if he led them to their bodies, which again, so many people like judged and kind of came at the police about that, because they're like, this is a man that murdered and dismembered this whole family's bodies, and you guys are gonna just put him in prison and not give him the death penalty. But they wouldn't have found the bodies. So I think it was in their best judgment to just make a deal with him, because he would not have confessed and led them to the bodies. So when they found the bodies, they ended up putting the whole story together. So earlier that morning, Matthew Hoffman had been watching Tina Herman's house, and the kids had gone to school, and Tina and her friend Stephanie had left the house to go to the store. I believe it was the store that they were going to go to. So when they left, he saw that the garage was a little bit open as it was closing behind them. So he picked it to be the perfect moment to slide in, and according to him, he just wanted to commit a robbery. And he was there for a little bit over an hour, and I don't know about you, but if I was a robber, I think I would try to get as much as I could, as fast as I could, to try to bolt out of there. So I don't quite believe that he was just in there to commit a robbery. He was there an hour later. So when Tina and Stephanie walked in on him, he stabbed them to death, and the children actually came in during the stabbing. So when they came in, he stabbed Cody right away. He ended up murdering him right then and there. And as for Sarah, he ended up taking her and tying her up, and he ended up obviously kidnapping her. And when they interviewed him and asked him why he spared her life, and he said, I wouldn't hurt her, I could never hurt her. So he had some sort of soft spot for Sarah, which in my head, I really think that he just was in some odd way attracted to her and wanted to sexually assault her. So of course, Sarah was rescued, and she was actually homed with her father, who was still alive, because I believe him and Tina had separated, so she ended up living with her father. So she ended up being safe and actually went on to do several interviews with her father about her being a survivor, and many people, you know, mentioned how powerful she was and how strong she was to have survived that and still try to live a positive, more normal life. Matthew, on the other hand, he is of course serving a life sentence for all 3 murders, and when neighbors were asked about him, they all kind of mentioned the same thing. They all stated that he was just a quiet man, but that he was pretty strange when it came to trees, that he would like to play in the trees. He would go to forest preserves. One of his neighbors even mentioned that he would be up in the trees listening into their conversations. So overall, Matthew Hoffman was just a really odd person, and it was just like a matter of time where he would explode. After the investigation, they ended up finding that his house had been in foreclosure, and it had been since January, and these murders happened in November. So it was probably coming toward the end, and he was most likely going to be losing his house. It was also mentioned that he and his girlfriend had separated. A neighbor said that she may have been living with him, and then due to like some sort of assault, she ended up leaving, but that's never been really confirmed. As for Sarah, unfortunately her nightmare did not end there. I was able to, after looking into her story, I ended up coming across a couple of articles that actually mentioned that her father and mother-in-law physically abused her. There was a testimony, there was a report made by her stating that her dad punched her in her back, on her back, and that her mother kicked her down the stairs. So she was actually taken away from her dad and stepmother, and she's now with her grandmother, and her grandmother says that she's doing great. So unfortunately, 3 years after that, her horrific, everything horrific that happened to her and all the trauma that she must have lived through, her father's home seems like it wasn't like a good place for her, but thankfully it seems like now she's doing so much better. So I'm really happy for her, and prayers go out to her and whatever's left of her family, to hope that they're all there and giving her positive energy. And we know now that Matthew Hoffman will rot in jail, and he probably will never see the light of day. So that was the absolute insane and tragic story about Tina Herman, her friend Stephanie, and her son Cody. I hope that you guys were able to enjoy this True Crime Tuesday. Make sure to always look back at your garage and make sure no one is sliding in when it's closing, because apparently people are really crazy out there. I'm so glad that you guys came back and watched another video, and I can't wait to see you here on next week's True Crime Tuesday. Unless you're into my Thursday videos, then I will see you on Thursday. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you next week. Bye.